What's going on, everybody? This is Nicholas Gomez Colon,
Nikos Myrogiannis Koukos.
and welcome to episode 7 of Out of This World, a podcast on Gustav Holst's The Planets. This is a very big day for us because this is our last official episode of the podcast that we're going to be recording for you all. And as we mentioned last episode, we're going to be talking about the last movement of the work.
Neptune the Mystic.
Yes, the Mystic. This is one pretty interesting movement, which can be same for all 7 of these, but we'll really be getting into some deeper topics today about this and really talking about what we can do or what Holst did to end the work altogether. Now, I do want to give our usual disclaimer. We are doing a deep analysis of this piece, trying to find a deeper meanings of the entire suite. I'm a composer myself. Nikos is a choral conductor, so we're kind of using our experiences in those fields to kind of like talk about things that stood out to us and listening to this and studying this work. As always, we just finished listening to the piece, and if you want to refer to the score that we're using or the recording that we're using of the piece, those will be available in the description below, so you can go ahead and follow along with us, or if you want to check it out after the fact, our materials are in the description for you all to check out there. So Nikos, the Mystic. This is what we end the piece on, and I want to open with that because we have talked about how some orchestras and some directors actually want to end after the 4th movement because they want to end on a happy note, but this is the true ending of the work, and definitely a lot of feelings I think to talk about with this one.
Well, it's a very interesting way to bring it home because it's actually literally not bringing it home. We're drifting far and far and far more like away from Earth, from our center. Now we're almost out of our solar system, and that, I guess, it shows into the work. So we're not talking, as every time, we're not talking about the planets themselves. So Holst was talking about the supposed astrological character of each planet.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the mystic has something to do that with the fact that Neptune is so far away. It's something that even to this day, with all those discoveries and breakthroughs, we still don't know actually many things about, and it's kind of shrouded in mystery even to this day. So I guess he knows that, and he kind of capitalizes on that fact. And today we're essentially talking on how is that present into the music.
Yeah, so kind of going into a topic that Nikos and I have been coming back to quite frequently here on the podcast is the idea of alienated music. And for those of you who may be just tuning into this episode who don't know what we mean by that term, alienated music is any type of rhythmic, harmonic, narrative, or any type of pattern or device that the composer uses to make that piece more unique and more interesting to the listeners. Obviously, as humans, like we're very used to a general threshold of music. So, for example, that might be for general listeners, like they know what 4/4 is. They know how that feels. They know how certain keys feel. They know that major means happy, minor means sad. So when you break out of that threshold and you have something that's more unique or something more interesting than that regular threshold, it stands out to you more. It's like an alienated factor, and we're using that term specifically for the planets, obviously being based in astrology and based in space itself. And it's interesting to think about this movement because one general consensus that Nikos and I came to was that this doesn't really have like an alienated factor. The entire work is alienated in and of itself.
So there are many little things here and there, but before we dive into small details, let me tell you this. So I'm gonna tell you what Holst himself said about this last movement. Uh, he said, number one, I don't want it to have any sense of development, like going somewhere. So, narrativity. I mean, there's always some narrative, and there's always some meaning to music, and that's why we're doing this podcast. But this specific movement is not based on linear developments one by one. You could say that, I mean, there is always the essence of like moving through time, but it's minimized for the effect of, I guess, doing whatever host would like to do, and he is successful or not. It's up to decide. It's up to for us to decide. But This essence of not going somewhere uh, was his first idea, and his a little more second specific idea is that he wants no specific sense of harmonic context in a way that you would not be able as a listener to identify like a home key, like a key center, like something that we're returning all the time to. So those are his two ideas for how to structure the entire movement. I don't think we were thinking about this. I don't know. I think that we've like identified a very specific formal structure. So many movements have like an A B A prime, or they're kind of like a weird sonata form with a big C in the middle, like Jupiter, or you know. So this movement has so many features that are not moving, and at the same time, it doesn't have a structural form as well. What do you say about that?
No, actually, no, I was just thinking about that and like thinking about the score in my head, and like it's interesting because I don't find much of a structure either. Nikos, when we were listening to the piece, was telling me how this work works more to create a soundscape, but create more of an actual like place of imagination as opposed to like a character or some type of specific being. So it's interesting like that he changes it in the last movement too. That instead of like creating a character, he's creating the world that character is in a really strange way. And this is reassured by just everything that he does. So obviously, if you look in the score, we have lots of running notes, both running up and down in the strings, in the harps. Some of the woodwinds have motions like this as well. So we have this like really big sense of ooh, but obviously in a instrumental side of things. And it's interesting because when I was listening to this happening in the middle section of this work, I almost just imagine like a Disney movie. I imagine like like Ursula or like some type of Disney villain like in their lair or in their cave, and like this eerie music that's just happening in the background. Like that's what I was able to picture with this work.
So it's kind of dark in the middle section. So okay, if there is some kind of form, it's kind of like an ABC. So it's kind of through composed. So we don't care to explore that much. But in the middle section that Nick is talking about, there is some darkness. Nothing compared to the previous movement. None at all. Certainly different instrumentation.
Absolutely.
Actually, I would even say like the opposite instrumentation.
Mm-hmm.
So there we have again our harps, our celesta, our wood instruments, and those are carrying alone that middle section. But it sounds eerie. It sounds like literally alienating, and that was probably the point. So for the first part for the first part of the of this movement, the A section, we have this beautiful 5/4 meter, which we had in the first movement.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like a hint to a cycle into the like of the overall structure.
That was one of the first notes I took when we were listening to this piece.
Right. So it's very apparent. It's very obvious. Everyone is in a double piano. And I have a note in my score by the composer here. It says the orchestra is to play sempre pianissimo throughout. So again, the orchestra is just like a small, it's small like a drawing, like a picture. It's not moving. It's always there, but at the same time, it lets your mind like slip to other thoughts and to other feelings, like kind of like what Eric Satie was doing with his piano music, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's very striking. So the composer didn't want any sense of tonality. So he's starting with arpeggiation, like Nick said, and the first chord is an E minor, and the second one is a G sharp minor. So that creates like a okay median relationship. Okay, where are we? Okay, if it was like a dominant or a subdominant, you're like okay, there's something happening. There's like a tension between chords, like in the same natural way that you feel with Mozart. But this is like okay, are we moving? Are we not moving? The arpeggiation going up and down, so there's no like arch. At the same time, the melody is going from E, G sharp, and then they are together, kind of like in later into the piece and in the middle section. But so there's this static, mystical like feeling of okay, we're somewhere, but we don't know where we are, and we don't know why, and this is very alienating.
Absolutely. And now, actually, I want to use that as a segue into something that Nikos and I have actually been planning on talking about for quite a while. This is definitely one of the most interesting aspects that Nikos and I have been wanting to talk about on the podcast, and that is, of course, the use of the chorus in this movement and this movement alone. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar, the work is primarily an orchestral suite, but in the last movement here in Neptune, we have a featured chorus that's 6 parts, all upper voices or all treble voices that sing towards the end of the movement, actually end the piece completely. So right off the bat, like if we're going for like this eerie unknown feeling, and we're trying to like embody this idea of not knowing where we are, this already is like presenting so much new material just from the get go of existing, because we haven't heard it yet. We don't know what their role is going to be, and especially compared to everything else in the suite, it creates this new timbre just by having voices present. So I'm very interested in Nikos, because I know you're very invested in this. Like, let's talk about the chorus for a second.
Okay, so that's kind of my thing here, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, well, Nick is also a choral conductor and a choral composer, so he knows exactly what we're talking about. We start in the C section, so after this big celesta violins, like arpeggiations that are like intensified, and we have this eerie moment, like Ursula being in her lair, as Nick put it very beautifully. Uh,
Thank you.
so we go to a very high G, like a sustained one. Uh, so in that last gesture, like the overall, like the big one, we start with low notes in the winds, going like and then they have like an imitative moment, and that is like it's setting the stage for the choir to appear. So it's a treble choir, not a mixed one, not a tenor bass ensemble, which I guess it's for registration and for effect. Uh, Not present on stage. Ideally, it's kind of like even if you were an audience, like looking at the instruments, like looking at the conductor and the orchestra and all that, you would most probably, if it was staged correctly, not be able to identify the chorus somewhere very presently, and they hold that note for quite some time, and only like in its last moments, it starts to do a messa di voce, like a crescendo, decrescendo,
Mm-hmm.
and so you know that's a good question. What does this big like held G represent for the composer? What like the sky is the planet itself. It's like the galaxy is like the spaceship going more and more in the distance. What would that be?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think if I were the composer and I wanted to have like a high G sustained for that long, I would definitely use it to create some type of layer in the world that we're creating. So in this instance, I would probably agree with you that I think I view it as kind of like the sky texture. Mainly because it's like obviously it's written out that way for a very long time, like on purpose. So we're obviously meant to like have some type of permeating effect with the use of this such a high note in the treble voice range. So it's interesting. I think I definitely would go with the path of like it resembling a sky or some type of major component of the environment of the world that I think Holst is trying to create.
So it's very atmospheric, and he knows that. So it's an introduction to the beginning of the end. Then they shift to a and those motives, and they start imitating more and more densely, and so there is a sense of development, but at the same time, to where? I mean, you know that it's the last movement, and you know that it's about to end. Uh, so you're starting to get the idea that the ending of the suit is a very alienating one. You know, like a work like the planets is not ending to like a big tutti forte,
Mm-hmm.
and so this is so amazing. And now I'm gonna give Nick the opportunity to talk about the last two measures of the piece, which is exciting.
Yes, actually, before I do that, I do want to mention one more unique thing about the chorus. Um, Chances are, if you're listening to this, like you've either sung in chorus before or you've heard choirs before, and one very salient feature, just as a result of the nature of how it's being performed, is text. And really listening to how different choirs, different composers set text and portray text in a choral setting. Now, why that's interesting here is because here we have no text at all. everything that's sung by the treble choir in the last movement of this work is just on open syllables that really just permeate and create this, like Nico said, almost ethereal feeling, because we don't even have a story being presented to us. It's just open ahs or ohs or whatever open value you choose to use, creating this big texture of just, I guess it's like, well, I don't want to say texture, creating this wall of sound that already sticks out to us and captures our attention compared to everything else that we've heard the orchestra do for the past 40 minutes. Now, I do want to talk about these last two measures because it is very interesting. So, Holst has the piece ending in a very unique way, in the sense where it ends with the chorus. So essentially, all the parts fade out over the course of the last two pages, like one section or like one like group of instruments at a time, until we just have like the voices that are singing, and they're singing all this, emphasizing a C sharp minor 7 chord. Now, why it's interesting is because it's actually marked in the score. This bar is to be repeated until the sound is lost in the distance. So really, for the first time, like Nikos and I were talking about this too, for the first time, like in the time period, like we had this direction by the composer, where the group ends the piece, not the conductor. It just really goes on until they feel that it's time to stop and really fade to nothing. So there's definitely, I think, some deeper meanings behind that.
So I'm gonna put it very bluntly. When do you clap? As in, look, okay, so you're in the audience, and the choral sound fades to the distance, and there's no specified vowel or sound. You can do many things, probably an ooh or an ah or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You really wouldn't go for an eh or something. That's like a goat. But okay, so the conductor is essentially doing nothing. They don't need to like micromanage this thing. And the choir is fading into the distance, and they usually kind of disappear off stage, or they're already off stage, or something like that. So you're left with a sense of, okay, when does it stop? What is happening? When, like, is it over? Like there's no sign, like with like there's no semiotic like sign that, okay, the work is ended. Now you can clap. Now you can stand and acknowledge the conductor and the orchestra and the everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that kind of work that the composer wanted to be like, okay, let's bow all together and let's all end on a high note. It's like literally lost into the distance. And I think one metaphor that we can use for that is like, okay, we are fading in existence in general. Like the choir is leading the way out, and you don't know for like some extra seconds or a minute even, you don't know why is that happening, and what is happening, and how is this ended, and am I supposed to do what? And perhaps this specific emotion is what he wanted to convey with the ending of the piece and the work altogether. Okay, the big 48-minute work is ended. Now what?
Absolutely. And honestly, I think there's even more narrative work to be done with this too. One big thing that I've been talking a lot about here on the podcast is this idea of uncertainty. That here we have this work called The Planets, and when people go to listen to it, oh, what was it about? It was about the planets. Literally, the title suggests a planet, and it's very clear what the subject matter is on. But it's interesting to think about the ending of the piece in this fashion, because we're really given that sense of uncertainty with this minor chord. We have this big C sharp minor 7 chord that remains unresolved and really just fades to nothing on it. And in a way, kind of like the work that he did in Magician, he leaves us with this sense of unease and this sense of unsatisfaction by not having like a big orchestral ending, and just like leaving us with the eeriness of not knowing what it's like in space. Like, you were in our world for the past 48 minutes, but here you are back out, and like it's wondering, like, is this reality or not? It's interesting to think about like that deeper meaning, and like making like almost in a way like making listeners question like what that experience was like.
Exactly. And as they question their own, like even their own existence, it's good to remember, as we said in previous episodes, okay, so some people could end the work after the fourth movement, which is jollity, right? So the composer said, no, this is not what life is about. So if you end, that's his word, I'm reciting.
Right.
If you end with jollity, then you're suggesting that life ends on a high note like that, in jollity. If you end with this movement, which is his intention, you say, okay, we're fading into existence. Now, uh, at some point there was an eighth movement composed called Pluto. The what it was called? It was about Pluto,
Mm-hmm.
the discoverer, the explorer. I'm gonna okay. I'm gonna do some research on that. It's not important. The important thing is that when you add an eighth movement, you're still kind of messing up the entire narrative. And I wouldn't advocate like many people ask me, would you do the Pluto? No. Number one, it's not by the composer. It's not as beautiful. It's good, but it's messing up with the idea of I want to end with a choir singing a C major chord with a major seventh, and I want that to fade into existence. And I want you to not be aware of when you should clap, if at all, like clap in the end.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that. And actually, I actually had no idea that composers added an eighth movement themselves, like adding to the work. It's very interesting. I'm very intrigued to see what their thought processes were in terms of like trying to match what Holst did and try to embody what Holst did, especially if they're like younger composers who weren't around during Holst's time. It really kind of like makes you wonder like what people take away from it. Um, Nikos is looking it up right now as we speak. Um, yeah, and it's interesting, like just thinking about like the use of the choir in that sense, because the last note I had for myself here was, he ends the entire work with just voices that creates this alienated effect, matching the title of the work perfectly. So we have this like eerie effect that we haven't heard before, this eerie sound that's going to be new to us and new to people when they listen to this, that leaves a sense of mystery. Well, why do you wait so long? Well, same sense of mystery as wondering what's space like, what are the planets like.
So, and again, this mystery, uh, as Nick was talking, I googled it, and so it's Pluto the Renewer, and yeah, so it's composed by Colin Matthews, 2000, but even from the title, I guess that's kind of not the composer's intention. So many things are alienating into the work throughout, and if you're a keen fan of this podcast, you would have identified some similar things as well. But the important thing is that this work is doesn't have a conventional form like a structure, movement to movement. It starts kind of like that with a uh, allegro, adagio Venus, then the intermezzo, the winged messenger, and then jollity. That's kind of a symphony. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you're a symphonist, you would end with Jupiter, and everyone would clap and be like, "Yeah, that was one hell of a concert." But it still has its own structure. Seven movements are long enough to be able to construct a narrative. It's not easy to keep your listeners, like your audience, with you the entire time. But Holst knows how to juxtapose slower movements with bigger, like brass with celesta, and the magician with a mystic, and he knows how to end. I mean, that's the important thing for the narrative of the entire suit. He knows how it ends, and that is giving the entire work how do you say that? You can listen to that again and again. Now that when you know the ending of the work, then you go back to the first and the second and the third movement, and they have even more meaning because you know the contour of the story, but you're still enjoying all the features that you heard in the first place. And this is what makes this work so beautiful. And this is why we decided to occupy ourselves with analyzing and listening to it and talking to you about it. And this was so fascinating, let me tell you that.
It really was, and Nikos and I cannot stress enough how much we recommend you to listen to the work. Go check it out yourself. Go listen just by yourself. Go listen with the score. There are a lot of stories to tell and a lot of ideas to behold within this work, and we're very interested to hear kind of what you think. We're kind of interested to hear like what you took away from the piece, from a particular movement, from the entire work overall. All these episodes are going to be available on on the YouTube channel. So please leave a comment below if you have any other comments or things that you want to talk about. And yeah, just let us know what your biggest takeaways are. And with that, my name is Nicholas Gomez Colon.
My name is Nikos Myrogiannis Koukos.
Thank you all so much for tuning into Out of This World. This podcast has been quite a delight to put together with Nikos. We've talked about a lot of great content with this work, and to think that this is only one orchestral suite of literally hundreds of thousands out there. Like, there are many stories to tell and many ideas to consider.
Well, if you didn't know the work like before that podcast, we hope to have hyped you into listening to that. If you knew the work and you hadn't thought about all these things, we're very glad to like help you guide like into the process. Either way, it was our great pleasure, and we wish to like keep with us with a new project someday. I don't know. We'll figure something out.
We'll keep you posted, and we'll have you stay tuned. Thank you everyone for listening. Take care.